And I needed that humbling experience. But after that, got a few more sales here and there, started working like a regular day job. And in that day job, I wasn't very happy, but it's what I had to do to pay the bills. And I said, hey, if this is very difficult to go in this office every day and writing, publishing, getting paid is also difficult, I got to divide my energy and put some energy into the difficult thing I really want to do.
What's up, Virginia? I am your host, Vania Alani, back with another episode of Billiards Magazine. I gotta say, I am super excited about this one. I am very, very proud of myself on this one. To give a little bit of context, I was browsing the media center at the high school I work at, and I found one of the best thrillers that I've read in a while, written by our guest today, Lamar Giles, called Ruin Road. Not only did this book have me hooked, but I started to notice some very specific references, not just to Virginia, but to the area I live in. So you know I had to hunt our mans down for an interview. You do not want to miss this. Stay tuned. Lamar Giles is a best-selling, award-nominated author and a founding member of We Need Diverse Books. He's known for sharp, suspenseful young adult thrillers like Fake ID, Endangered, Overturned, and Spin, three of which are Edgar Award finalists. His middle grade hit, The Last Day of Summer, earned major praise from the New York Times. Lamar's first contemporary coming-of-age novel, Not So Pure and Simple, broke new ground in his work. He's also the editor of Fresh Ink and a major contributor to acclaimed anthologies like Black Enough and His Hideous Heart. Lamar's two most recent novels, Ruin Road and The Getaway, are heavy hitters. Whether it's mystery, fantasy, or real-world drama, he brings heart, humor, and representation to every page. Welcome to Billiards Magazine and podcast, Lamar Giles. Mr. Lamar! It is a serious privilege to be interviewing you. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you for having me, Vania. I've been looking forward to this.
So for starters, who is Lamar Giles and where is he from?
Lamar Giles is the writer of many novels, maybe 15 or so at this point, and he is from Hopewell, Virginia. Virginia native, grew up in Hopewell, left there in the late 90s to come to Old Dominion University in Norfolk, and been doing the writing thing ever since. I started out writing in elementary school, got my first lessons from actual writers at Old Dominion, and afterwards went on to break into the publishing industry and have been doing that full-time novelist for the last decade or so.
So you started taking writing serious, like, would you say you started taking writing the most seriously in college?
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily being in college that made it happen. I didn't understand that writing could be a job. And the thing that made it sort of accessible was there was this book by Stephen King called On Writing that came out around my sophomore, junior year of college. And in that book, Stephen King talks about how as a teenager, he would write short stories and sell them. And he walked through the process. No one had ever talked to me about this process before. I didn't know anything about it, but it turns out the process he went through in the late 60s was still pretty much the same process for selling your short stories in the early 2000s. And so once I realized, like, hey, maybe I can make a little side money selling some of these stories I've been writing, I angled that way. Still didn't think it would be a career. I just looked at it as like maybe some extra money if I get good enough. And even if I don't make any money, I'm still improving at the craft. And end up selling like the very first short story I ever submitted, which made me feel like a prodigy. I was like, I'm about to be that guy. And then like for the next 3 years, everything was a rejection. And I needed that humbling experience. But after that, got a few more sales here and there, started working like a regular day job. And in that day job, I wasn't very happy, but it's what I had to do to pay the bills. And I said, hey, if this is very difficult to go in this office every day and writing, publishing, getting paid is also difficult, I got to divide my energy and put some energy into the difficult thing I really want to do.
You know, like that story you just told, like, that is something I definitely needed to hear right now in my journey as an artist as well, because whether people acknowledge it or not, writing is an art. I think a lot of times we associate it with academia. We associate books with just learning. I think people forget that it is a craft. It is an art. And the story you just told, I feel like that's a hump every artist has to go through at some point. But speaking of you being from Hopewell and then eventually coming over to the 757, I'm just curious, what was being in the 757 like in comparison to where you grew up?
So you have to understand that Hopewell was and is a factory town. Like that's the primary industry here. So in some ways, it's a slower moving pace where people go to the plant job, the adults from 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon, or 3 to 11, or do the overnight shift, and their kids are just in school. When I came to Old Dominion from this environment, I was around a bunch of people my age, way more than I'd ever been around before on campus. Nobody's going to a plant job. We're going to class, we're hanging out. And so that felt like a more nurturing place for the artistic part of me than what I was feeling at home. And it's not that anybody at home discouraged me. My mom was very encouraging of what I was trying to do, but it was something about being around other young people who all had various goals. I may have been the only person in my group who wanted to be a writer per se, but there were people who wanted to do music, people who wanted to be engineers, people who wanted to build computers. And it was just like a whole plethora of things people were doing that were vastly different than what I was used to in Hopewell. And so I just enjoyed that, and also not having a curfew.
No, facts.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I feel like, so I've lived in Norfolk my whole life. I've been to other parts of Virginia, but so many people come to the 757 or come to Virginia and they rag on it, but I think there's so many beautiful things about this area that people don't acknowledge. And I know for a fact that you would agree, even based off of what you just said. So, with that being said, how do you feel like your roots in Virginia, both Hopewell and the 757, influence your work?
Oh, it's all through my work, and that comes from frustrations I used to feel in high school when I had to go to English class. You have to keep in mind, my mom raised us to be like really adamant readers. We love to read, we love libraries. And when I was in my English classes in high school, it was the first time in my life that I hated reading because everything we were reading just felt like something so vastly different than the people I knew, and I couldn't understand why. Like, why are we always reading about these kids from London? Why are we always reading about people from elsewhere? And I don't know that I knew where I was going with my writing, but I knew I had this thought of if I ever get to put a book out, my goal is to make kids in London have to read about Virginia. And that's been working out pretty well. I wanted to see stories that reminded me of the people I knew, whether that was my friends, my cousins, my mom, my grandparents, and I wasn't seeing that in the stuff that the teachers were telling us were the important books. So I made a point, and I didn't. I made that decision not knowing whether it would be the sort of thing that kept me out of the industry. Like, would New York publishers not pay attention to a guy who's always writing about Virginia? But I said I'm gonna do it no matter what. And with the exception of maybe two or three of the books, everything's set in VA.
I can't stand to like turn it back on myself, but like you're making me feel so normal right now. Cause I felt the same way. I grew up being an avid reader, and my mom was like, she always wanted me to be very literate because she felt like that wasn't something she got when she was a
Yeah,
kid.
yeah,
So all of like the toys, books, like a lot of what I had was centered around being an avid reader, an effective reader. And I also really enjoyed writing. And then all of a sudden I get to high school and I started to feel like I couldn't read anymore. And not
yeah,
because I struggled to understand the material, but to be frank, I didn't give a fudge brownie about what we were reading. I didn't care about these stories. Some of these stories didn't make sense to me. And it wasn't for a lack of comprehension, but I was just like, when you're not seeing yourself reflected, like not just in literature, but just in your education period, because the important books typically don't depict people of color. And when they do, it's always either the most stereotypical version or, they're just jump into all the trauma stuff. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I got to high school and I felt the same way. All of a sudden, I didn't like reading anymore. All of a sudden, I didn't want to do it anymore. And I started to think maybe I peaked in my skill set as a reader. And if it means anything to you, when I read Ruin Road, because that's how I found out about you. When I
Right.
read Ruin Road, I had not zoomed through a book like that since I was a kid.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad.
And it might be a
I,
young adult novel, but like I suggest all regular adults, all, other 20-year-olds, like that book was amazing. But, to get off my little soapbox, I just have to ask, did
sure.
any of your time in Norfolk specifically influence your storytelling?
Certainly. I try not to use real cities often when I'm writing, and the reason is I'm cheating a little bit. I don't want
Yeah.
to be held responsible for actual geography because you know how our people are here. Like
Yeah.
you don't want to mess up that stuff. And sometimes I need to manipulate things for plot. So typically the cities I use are stand-ins for cities I've lived in, whether that's Hopewell, Norfolk, Chesapeake, and it's all through the books. But I'll tell you, my time in the 757, what most influenced me was probably just the realization that I could take classes with actual writers when I was an Old Dominion. That was a revelation to me. I didn't know there was a such thing as writing classes. And then when I looked them up, and we still had, this is how old I am, we still had paper catalogs. And so when I look it up in the catalog and see these classes are being taught by people who've actually published books, that's amazing to me. And being able to talk to them in that environment that I love so much, that gave me a lot of fuel for what ended up being the next decade of a lot of rejection while trying to break in.
Mm,
So, if like I say, if you read any of the books, there's probably going to be some similarity to Virginia Beach or Chesapeake or Richmond if we're coming back to 804 side. I won't call them the cities that we know, but if you know them, you know them.
right. So you're a founding member of We Need Diverse Books. And yes, we do. We do so badly. Um, I actually have well, no, I think people know this now. You ever read a diverse book and you can tell immediately that this is written from the perspective of a white woman?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Like when I was on your website and I saw the We Need Diverse Books, I was like, yeah, because diversity is always being defined. No shade to our white women, they're trying. But sometimes I read books and I'm like, that was a choice. That was a choice. So it was so great to see someone that, I mean, like reflects myself, reflects something other than the white woman's perspective of everything else. Hopefully I'll find a more PC way to say that before I finish out this question. Um just tell me more about the development of that nonprofit.
Sure. So it first started in 2014, and it's the brainchild of Ellen O, who is a fantastic writer of fantasy novels for young children. And I was having lunch with her and another writer from Virginia, Meg Medina. And this was at a writing conference in Northern Virginia. It was my first book. I think Ellen might have been on her first book. Meg might have been on her third or fourth book. And we were sitting down talking about how we were all having difficulties getting our publishers to really support us. I'm Black, Ellen's Korean American, Meg's Cuban American, and we all have the same story of growing up and wanting to see ourselves in books. And Ellen pretty much says, "Hey, we can't be the only ones that think like this." And this was at the time when a hashtag on Twitter was a huge thing if it went viral. And Ellen says, "Hey, let's just do a hashtag called We Need Diverse Books, see who else has these stories." And there was one other thing that incited this. Our industry used to have this conference called BookCon, which was a huge industry event they held in New York every year. And they would bring in all sorts of writers, publishers, people in television, news, or whatever. And they made this announcement that spring of here are our 40 superstar children's authors. And every author was white except for one. And the one that wasn't white was a cat, grumpy cat. Yeah. You heard me correctly. There was this meme. I don't know if you remember this or not. There was this meme thing where this cat just looks grumpy,
I
and
remember.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
remember.
and
That's
it became
crazy
a whole
though.
thing.
That's
Yeah,
absolutely insane. And it really runs parallel with that whole thing where whenever we're depicted in animated movies, we're always getting turned into animals for some
yeah,
reason.
yeah, yeah. So
Crazy.
all white and a cat, and that's when Ellen was like, we'd already talked about the hashtag. Ellen said, "Do it," and we started the hashtag. People telling stories about what it means to see themselves represented, posting pictures of their kids, reading books that represent them, and this thing started to trend nationally and then worldwide. Became this huge thing to the point where BookCon invited us to the conference to come speak on it because they knew their announcement was part of the inciting incident. And from that point on, so many people wanted to talk to us. I'm talking about, I'm getting interviewed by New York Times, LA Times, NPR. It's really ridiculous how much it blew up. And Ellen, to her credit, says, we can't let it just be about us. And that's where the nonprofit piece came. And the mission of the nonprofit is to make sure everybody can get to a book that represents them. And we do programs that help creators, help readers, help classrooms, give awards to books that might not be recognized by other industry awards. And it's been going strong for 11 years now. And I mean, and confession, I haven't been part of the day to day since 2018. I'm still cool with everybody. We still talk. But I did a lot of work from 2014 to 2018, but my publishing schedule picked up so much I couldn't keep going because it was volunteer work and it just wasn't enough time in the day. But I'm still very much into everything they're doing. Love everybody that's running it. It's still doing really good work.
I really resonate with this whole conversation, just being on the education side of it, because even though literature is a form of entertainment, we associate it so heavily with education. And being on the educator side of it, whenever we get our curriculums handed to us, and we do get handed to us, we don't choose what we teach the students. It's I get it that they do have to have some, or it's beneficial to have some understanding of, the history of literature, but everything is so far out of touch a lot of the times. And the kids feel so disconnected from what they are forced to read, what I'm forced to teach them. And, when even up to where I'm at in the Getaway, right? We have a whole unit on dystopia and utopias. If I had like a good class set, I could teach that unit with that book, and I would, because they would love it. But
How
we
many
don't get those opportunities typically.
how many do
Um,
you need for a class set?
for a class set, like 30. You need like 30 these days.
I'll see what I can do. I'll see what I can do.
Um,
I could probably pull 30 together for you. I'll look at what I have here.
okay.
Yeah,
I won't get my hopes up, but my hopes are already up. So,
yeah. I'll do my best.
but obviously, you have a real specialization in young adult literature. You've won multiple awards from it. Like you said, 14 plus novels, I think.
Yeah.
Um, what I can see, that's, if nothing else, a big portion of your work, and you're really seriously good at it. So how do you stay connected to the youth in order to be able to tailor your stories so well to them?
So I'll be honest with you, it used to be easier. A lot of it had to do with still being very close. And you got to keep in mind when I started, I've been writing professionally for over 20 years now. So that's still being close with my young cousins at the time. They're not young anymore. Once the books started publishing, that's me being able to go into schools, speak with the kids, sit with them at lunch, talk to them about stuff they care about,
Yeah.
getting into my own teaching. So I'm teaching college level where I'm seeing young writers come in who are still 17, 18 years old sometimes. Since the pandemic, when the world shut down and that forced a lot of us inside for so long, it has gotten more difficult. And the truth is, I worry about it like, am I falling out of touch? I
Mm.
still get a chance to go into schools from time to time. But the truth is, I don't know how much that's going to happen anymore, just off the nature of where we are in terms of the administration we're dealing with right now and what efforts are being made to sort of quiet anything anything that even has the scent of diversity on it.
Literally anything with the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. Literally,
Exactly.
just
It,
anything with the title is getting
exactly.
pulled, plugged, and punched.
I don't know how I keep doing it. I still have my nieces and nephews. I got my daughter who's very young. Um, I'm reading the things that are meant for my audience. But I do worry because I'm getting older and I don't want to overstay my welcome, if that makes sense. I
Mm,
want to make sure I'm still writing things that are relevant and not just writing things that get published because I am who I am.
yeah.
So, but in some ways that's good. I think you kind of need to be nervous and a little bit scared about doing this. I think if you ever really got comfortable doing this work, you're probably not doing great work at that point.
Yeah, 100%. But something I noticed in the two that I've read so far is it does feel really connected. Can you just because I don't want to misquote, can you remind me what year Ruin Road got published?
Ruin Road was 2024.
2024. So that was last year.
That's last year.
2020 and the Getaway 2022, 23, 22,
22, 22.
22. So
Yeah.
that's super recent. And they was felt super connected to me. Granted, I'm not a teenager, but
Mm,
I mean, even down to the use of the slang. And
mm.
I've seen, adults try to use slang in their books and just go. But it is super connected. And not only is it super connected, your characters are so vulnerable in a way that we don't get enough credit for being and having. Because obviously we're human beings, but a lot of times when people are trying to provide the diversity in reference to what I was saying earlier without living in our shoes, they're so busy trying to emulate the experience that they forget that we're people. And I think what keeps you connected to the youth is I don't see you trying to put on the mask of a young man. I think you tell very honest stories because even as an adult, we still feel a lot of the same things teenagers feel. We might not have the same lingo per se, but you're never really that disconnected from when you were younger. So if it means anything, I think
Well,
you're still good. I think you're in your prime for real, for real.
what
Uh,
one thing I always try to do is draw on the memories I have of that time in my life
mm,
because I think there are certain things that are universal to your teenage years, regardless of what generation you are. And that's going to be you're going to have your first crush, you'll have your first heartbreak. There'll be times when you're very scared, times when you could have gotten into a lot of trouble and you did or didn't. That tends to be a template that I can work from no matter what. And then it becomes a matter of just trying to find the truth in our modern time.
yeah. So what other authors or storytellers inspire your writing?
So my absolute favorite author is Tanana Reeve Dew, who is the author of books like The Between, My Soul to Keep, The Tennyson Hardwick Mysteries with her husband Stephen Barnes, and most recently, 2023, I believe, a book called The Reformatory. Um, Vania, are you familiar with any of those books? So I'm going to give you some homework. I'm going to give the teacher some homework and
Mm-hmm.
let you know you want to read some Tanana Reeve Dew. She is fantastic. Aside from her, I'm really lucky to say a lot of people I admire are peers and colleagues. So in terms of the young adult space, like there's people like Danielle Clayton, Tiffany D. Jackson, Jason Reynolds, um, Kwame Alexander, Meg Medina, who's right here in VA, Amber McBride, who's also right here in VA. These are fantastic writers who, in my mind, are some of the absolute best doing it right now.
Can you spell the first one to
T A N
CANANARIVE?
A N A R I V E. And the
Oh,
last
that
name
was
is,
one name. That was
yes.
like, oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Tanana
yeah.
Reeve,
And the last name is Due, Due.
UE.
And I would say either start with My Soul to Keep or The Reformatory. Those are my two absolute favorites, but she doesn't miss. Anything you find of hers is worth your time.
Okay. Hey man, if you like it, I know I'm gonna love it.
Oh,
I saw the
and
key performatory tonight to not read do. Okay.
yeah, hit me up. Hit me up once you read any of it.
I will. I will. You might get a voice memo on Instagram. You might get a whole
Do it.
voice note. I'm
Do it.
good for that. I'm
Hey,
good for a
hey, I'm
you'll get
I'm
a whole
always down.
podcast episode review.
Let's do it.
Okay, bet. Bet. So now the time I've been waiting for.
Let's do
We're
it.
gonna get real specific. So as you know, I like have a hard on for Ruin Road at this point. Um, I don't know what it was. I mean, I do know what it was. That like one, I'm a huge horror fan, right? And when I was browsing the library that day, and I do this a lot, me and the media specialist at the high school I work at are like, we're locked in for life at this point. I'm always in there, and I may as well be the media specialist myself. But I like to read the books in the library so I can recommend them to students. And I actually do the book reviews in the library because, it's just like a whole system we got going on.
Sure.
But I never actually looked at the suspense thriller section because I was like, what could they possibly have in there that would even like move me in the slightest? And this book happened to be sitting like out facing just like how it was sitting just now. It just so happened to be sitting up. And I picked it up and I was like, man, let's see. And I started reading it. And when I tell you, I'm so glad my kids were testing that week because when I tell you, I was like, go like wake up, go to sleep, just like. And I say that it didn't take me long. This took me like 2 days to, get through it for real. But when I saw that the dad was driving to Williamsburg to go to Great Wolf Lodge, I said Great Wolf Lodge in Williamsburg. Hey, I was like, hey, this guy's talking about Virginia. So immediately I was on the website. I said, hold on. I need answers immediately. I said, wait, he went to ODU. He's from Hopewell, Virginia. I was already enjoying the book, but that just drew like my connection and excitement to a whole new level. And it was like the whole experience that was going on in my mind while I was reading it. It was just very like Jordan Peele, but teenagers.
Yeah.
And it was so good. And I can only say but so much without spoiling it. But oh my gosh, like I don't even have a question. I'm just like, just
Well,
to be able to sit there and tell you, like, yo, it was so good. It was just so good. It was. Do you have like any references, by the way, for that ring? Because I was like, Patriots Super Bowl ring. I just wanted to know what it looked like in real life.
so the Patriots Super Bowl ring from that year, you could Google it and you'll see exactly what it looks like. And the reason people have asked me this a bunch because they want to know if I'm a Patriots fan, like why I chose that. And it's not that I'm a Patriots fan. It's just that particular comeback is such a legendary comeback. It felt like something that Cade would have keyed on in
Mm,
terms of coming back from struggle, you know?
right.
And so, but yeah, if you Google that, you can see what that ring looks like. But I also tell you this, I'm glad the Williamsburg piece got you. It almost wasn't that. And I want to tell this story because you have the getaway behind you. Um, I wanted to send Cade's dad and sister to Karloff Country, which is
Okay.
in the
Hold
getaway.
on, same universe. You know what I'm saying?
The reason I didn't, and the reason it became Williamsburg and the Great Wolf Lodge, is because of my TV deal for the getaway. And it turns out
Mm.
that the way, like, it was a whole long thing with my lawyer and stuff when we were getting the deal together. But it's a whole thing now with these contracts where if you have overlap in a property that they have the rights to, the studio could conceivably claim ownership over other property that you've written.
That's crazy.
And so, like the idea of putting Easter eggs and stuff, I have to be careful so not to compromise who owns what in my
Right.
universe. And so that trip was supposed to be Karloff Country from the getaway, but because of the TV deal, I had to make it something else. And it's just, I'm glad that that was something that stuck out to you because in my mind, I was really upset about having to do that for a long time. Like, I want
What?
to have, And I talked to my lawyer. I said, hey, but what about Stephen King? He does this all the time. And my lawyer was like, you're not Stephen King, which
Damn.
is real blunt. Like
Yeah,
you're not
like you're
him.
not Stephen
You're
King.
not him. You're not him. So I just being that you keyed on that, I wanted to tell that story because it's something that a lot of people just would never know.
Man, I'm glad that the intellectual property right laws fell in the favor of that, just because I don't know, like it was like this giddiness of like, oh my gosh, he's from Virginia, and not just like a play. Things take place in Virginia, sure, but a lot of times when they do, they almost associate Virginia with like the country,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I don't hate that, but I was already drawing like there were like already these like connections, and maybe Jacob's Town, what was it called again?
Jacob's Court.
Jacob's Court. Jacob's Court might have not been a direct mirroring of Norfolk, but it did make me think of Norfolk because of the way you describe the environment of, over here is, the project housing. Over here is where, like, Virginia's very segregated without being segregated.
Yeah.
So just the
Yeah.
way you described it reminded me a lot of where I stay. And then when you said Williamsburg, Great Wolf Lodge, I was like, he not talking about Williamsburg, New York. He's talking about Virginia.
That's
And
absolutely correct.
the whole, like, everything that had happened up until that point had changed for me, like 100%. And then it changed the rest of the story for me. But now to get on a different, soapbox about the Getaway. So, like you mentioned, you have a TV deal for that, and I'll, tread lightly because I, one, don't want you to get put on the list, and I also, we'll be careful with contracts and things. But you had your book picked up for a TV series by Don Cheadle and his producing partner, Karen Smith Forge.
Yes.
And you're also producing on that project as well, correct? They're executive producing, you're producing?
That's correct.
How do you feel about that? How do you know what I'm saying? That's crazy. That's a big deal.
Well, I mean, it's been a really good experience, and I've been down this road before with some of the other books, and those weren't necessarily great experiences. I've had times when I've signed over rights to things, and in the beginning, they pretty much woo you to get you on board, and then I've had situations where once I signed the paperwork, the producers never talked to me again, and then maybe a year or two later, they decide to move on to something else. That's the way that business is. I'm not going to act like that's something that's exclusive to me. But going into the Getaway, there was a lot of interest. I mean, a lot of interest. I talked to many producers who've done amazing things that you will recognize. And the thing I said to everyone at that point, because I was sort of over all of it, I'm like, if you want me to sign off and you're not going to deal with me anymore afterwards, I'm not interested. And the thing was, when I said that to Karen at Mr. Cheadle's company, the vibe from her was just like, I don't understand why anyone would do that to you. And I believed her. She said, she's like, if we're going to adapt your work, I don't understand why we wouldn't have conversations with you, why we wouldn't let you know what we're doing, why we wouldn't ask for advice when we have questions. She says, I don't know who you're going to choose because she knew a lot of people were knocking on the door, but she said that would not be the case with us. I believed her. And through all the producer interviews I went through, none of them felt as good as when I talked to Karen. And so that made it an easy choice. And Karen has kept her word. Um, we talk at least once a month, and not always about the project. Sometimes we just talk to catch up. But she has done everything she said she would do, and she's put together a fantastic team. I've seen what they're working on. Um, I'm ecstatic, and fingers crossed. This business is a strange business,
Mm-hmm.
so there's no guarantee. Like in my mind, nothing's real until I can either walk into a movie theater or hit play on my TV and see it. But
Yeah.
I will say this has been my very best experience in Hollywood, and I think we have some really good momentum.
I mean, I'm also really excited, like already just with how far I've gotten in there. I'm just excited to see how they manifest different, just like concepts, things, like literal things and settings. And, Karloff Country and Chantria, the households, because there are some very stark similarities. So you said this published in 22, right?
That's correct.
Some of like, have you noticed that some of these things that you wrote in 2022 are like very much so present now?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I I've been telling people like I feel bad because pretty much the only thing I've gotten wrong so far is that LeBron James Jr. was going to be a great basketball player in the NBA. He still got time. He still got time though, so I might get that right too. But yeah, I have noticed the similarities, and it's not that I'm super prescient, but I think it's similar to what Octavia Butler did in Parable of the Sower back in the early 90s, where people read that book and they read it now and they're like, Miss Butler knew the future. But I think, and she may have spoken on this, I think she just paid attention to what a natural extrapolation of current events would be.
Hmm.
And that's the thing I tried to do. Like, I just tried to really run things out to a logical conclusion based on what I was seeing in 2020.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I've talked about this before. The thing that really inspired the creation of Call of Country was a story I read from a man named Douglas Rushkoff, who people consider to be something of a futurist. He wrote this book called Survival of the Richest, and he tells the story because he speaks on topics like currency, environmental things, things that could affect the future. He says he got invited to go speak. He got paid more money than he'd ever gotten paid to give a speech. He was flown by private jet to this place, and he thought it was going to be a venue of a bunch of people. But when he got there, there wasn't a lot of people. It was just five people, five of the richest people on the planet who only wanted to pepper him with questions. They wanted to know what cryptocurrency they should invest in. They want to know where they should go if there's a environmental disaster. And the question they asked that really startled him was they mentioned having these doomsday bunkers. And in order to protect their doomsday bunkers, should something happen, they've hired these really tough guys like Navy SEALs, um, special forces dudes. And the question is, if there's a disaster that makes money worthless, how can I control these tough men so they don't take over my bunker? Can I lock up their food? Can I put shock collars on them? These are real questions that the most powerful people on earth were asking. And that almost gave me the novel whole. The other part of it was my experience the 6 months I did not live in Virginia when I went down to Orlando, Florida to work and live at a very famous vacation resort. I was Jay Butler for 6 months. The character Jay in the book, that was me for 6 months. The one period I did not live in Virginia.
So aside from his legitimate, like, actual external physical circumstances, how much of Jay Butler is you aside from that?
A lot, because the thing that Jay struggles with is how much can he tolerate in order to make sure his family's good. And that's a question I found myself asking a lot around the time of the pandemic because my wife was pregnant with our daughter. It's our first child. And so that automatically makes me start thinking of things differently. And just watching the state of the world, it just became this question of like, what could I look away from if it meant my daughter would be safe? And how much would that eat up my soul if I'm looking away from actual travesties because I think somehow my family's going to be okay when the truth is my family wouldn't be okay. That safety is an illusion. And that theme is all through Jay's journey in the getaway.
Something I found interesting is in your character, I'm actually about to butcher her name.
Let me guess, Seychelles. Yes.
Seychelles.
Yeah.
So, as something that I actually really liked about Seychelles as a fellow biracial baddie is that I feel like this is probably one of the most honest depictions of a mixed race person. And I say that, or a mixed race woman particularly. And the reason I say that is I think there are some assumptions about what struggles would exist being mixed that aren't necessarily true. And maybe they are true for some people. But for instance, something I think is super cliche is too white for the black people, too black for the white people. Because really what it is you are too black for the white people. You can really always come home to the black people. And I feel like what I've seen for Seychelle, as far as I've gotten, is she feels more at home with her friends, other black people, than she can ever feel, with her blood family. They treat her as other. Um, and I think that people are not honest about that. And I like that she has so far so many layers to her personality, because I think it's really easy for people to make, both in real life and in storytelling, make the whole personality being light skinned. The whole personality is being mixed. But I really appreciate the depiction of Seychelle, because so far it's just been something different than what I usually see when people are discussing the plights of the mulatto, of the light skin, of the biracial.
Well, I can speak to where that came from because I don't have that experience. But the thing I was really drawing on, I think when I created her, it was around the time that Meghan Markle did that Oprah interview, and she was talking about being pregnant and saying that the British royal family, or at least certain members of the British royal family, were very concerned about a child coming into the castle that was mixed race.
Mm.
And I think the thing that stood out to me was like that kid can if that kid hears any part of this or feels any part of this from his or her relatives. I don't know. I can't remember if the child had been born at the time. I'm like, there's no way they can feel comfortable. There's no way they're going to feel comfortable around family. So they're going to have to find like choose family that will accept them. So that's the extrapolation I was getting when I was writing Seychelle, because in a way, her family is the royal family of Karloff country.
That makes sense. That makes so much sense. And I'm not gonna lie, like there was definitely a part of me that was like, out of all the times I would finally see the depiction that, I actually resonated with. And there are other depictions of light skinned women that don't necessarily, involve contemporary settings and time periods. But usually when they are contemporary, it's just so cliche and just not real.
Hmm.
So when I was reading it, I was like, oh, like this, I get her. I understand her. She gets me.
I'm
So that
glad.
that makes a lot of sense that you were able to, and it's very commendable that you were able to listen to somebody else tell their story and intertwine it so honestly with the characters that you were creating. You have an upcoming release available for pre-order now. Bad Batch, a Star Wars novel. Talk to us
Yes.
about that.
Yeah, so I got a chance. This is my second time working in the Star Wars universe. I got to write a short story for them a while ago, but they reached out a little over a year ago now and asked me if I'd be interested in writing a Bad Batch novel. So if you don't know the Bad Batch, they're characters on a Star Wars show on Disney Plus. They're known as Clone Force 99, and they are on the run from the Empire. Each of them has a specific set of skills. They're bouncing all over the galaxy, getting into various adventures, and I got to add to their story by writing two adventures. They're going on two missions to try to save their new home, Pabu. And it's strange because I can't talk a lot about Star Wars stuff. Like I'm not allowed to. But what I can say is, if you love Star Wars and I love Star Wars, I hope you'll find some fun in this story because I got a chance to create some new characters. You'll see some familiar characters. And particularly if you take some time to watch The Bad Batch, and I recommend that you do, you're going to see some beloved characters that have really made an impression on me over the last few years. So I don't know if I'm answering your question the best way I can. It's sort of tricky
Yeah, no,
dancing around
no, you
the
totally are.
Star
You
Wars
totally
rules.
are.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that. I mean, I know that you got things that you got to keep on the hush hush for right now. So no, I totally get it. No, that was like a perfect answer, and I definitely will get to watching that because I actually hadn't even heard of Bad Batch until um seeing that your novel was coming out soon. What other projects are you excited about? Do you have any other upcoming projects aside from what we've talked about?
I'm working on a mystery novel, which it's very early stages, I don't have a title for it yet, but it's about a girl in Virginia who works at a grocery store. Her boss gets murdered, and she gets promoted to night manager, and finds out that she's pretty much running a mob front.
First off, I love a good whodunit.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love mystery. I love mystery. Have you seen the new show on Netflix? How did I already forget? It has how did I forget everybody's name? Like just forgot everybody's name. It has the girl from Orange is the New Black.
The Residents.
I don't know what
I'm,
I was about to say, but have you seen it?
I've watched the first episode and it's very good. I'm going to finish it. I'm going to keep going. I just haven't had a chance to get back to it yet. Me and my wife watched the first episode, enjoyed it quite a bit. So I will be going back to it.
Okay, yeah, I definitely watched it all in one sitting. So
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and keep my mouth shut about that. A lot of people don't want to give fiction literature a chance. Many people read, but they only read, at least in my experience, right? They read a lot of self-help, a lot of nonfiction, a lot of for informational purposes. What would you say to those people missing out on the world of literary fiction?
Well, I preface this with, people like what they like. But if I
Mm-hmm.
get a chance to talk to you a bit, I might ask, do you like television? Do you like movies? Did you go see Sinners? Did you love that the way I loved it? If you enjoy those things and you enjoy them being well done and you enjoy like the visual tapestry that comes with it, you got to understand there's no movie screen that's better than what's in your head, particularly when a good piece of writing helps you form the pictures for yourself. And that would be my pitch. If there's something you like that's not a book, I can point you to a book that's like that thing, and I guarantee you'll have a immensely better experience than you do with the things you like. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with what you like, because I love movies too. I love TV too. I like my occasional self-help book, but I can find a book where you'll be blown away and feel like you've been missing out. So just give me a few minutes of your time.
All right. So, what is the ultimate dream? You're doing big things, but what's the vision?
Well, there's still stuff. I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of things I set out to do. I've been able to write comic books. Hopefully, this TV show happens, so we'll be doing that. Um, I want to write picture books. I want to do two ends of the spectrum. I want to write picture books, so books for super young children, because I read a lot of them with my daughter, and I would love to create something that I can say this comes from all the reading we did together.
Hmm.
And then I want to write an adult book on the other end. I want to write something for grown folks because it's time. I'm not leaving young adult alone. I'm not leaving middle grade alone, but I have the time to work on an adult novel, and that's my plan over the next year or two to write something just for me. I don't know if it'll publish. I don't know if anybody will want it, but I do want to write something for grown folk just because I am grown, and I want to be able to provide for that audience too.
Can I just say that Ruin Road was like a hop, skip, and a jump away from being an adult novel?
It's close. It's close.
It was like there are some things where I was just like, I'm telling you, if he just like swung the this scene just a little different, it's pretty much up there, especially towards. And I'm gonna be vague with how I describe this very insane scene at the end. But when we start axing body parts, I was
I'll say
like,
this.
no,
This
please.
this is something else I would love to do. I would love to do a graphic novel version of Ruin Road,
Oh my god, that would be
or
sick.
or something graphic in that universe, because there's room to tell more story there.
I promise you, I already need a follow up.
Yeah,
I need a follow up. I really
yeah.
do. Because how are you going to give me that epilogue with Miss Ma'am? I want to call her Grace, but that's not her name, is it?
Gabby.
Um, Gabby. I'm just making up names at this point.
Well, I almost forgot. I was like, what is her name? I mean, that's what happens when you're dealing with all these characters I deal with all day. I almost forgot her name.
You're gonna give me that not epilogue. No, that's the epilogue. Yeah, the
Epilogue. Yeah,
epilogue
yeah,
with Gabby.
yeah.
I was like, now you have to tell me what happens next. You can't just
I
throw
would
that
love to
out
get
there. I
into it.
have to know.
In my mind, the continuation of Ruin Road is in graphic form. I would love to do something like that.
I need to know what happens with Gabby. So when that comes, I just want you to remember we had this conversation. I'm
Absolutely.
begging you, please.
I'll send it to you first.
So I want you to remember this conversation because I will remember everything you just said. I'm holding you to all of that. But on that note, be sure to check out Lamar and our May issue of Billiards Magazine on www.billiardsvmsoa.com and our Instagram page. And be sure to connect with Lamar on Instagram at Lamar Giles, that's Giles, for everything he has going on. Lamar, where can the people find your work?
The books are anywhere books are sold. If you don't see it on the shelf, you can just ask the bookseller. And you can find me at my website, lamargiles.com, to stay up to date on everything that's happening.
Until next time, I'm your host, Vania Alani. And remember, Virginia is not just a place for lovers, it's a sanctuary for dreamers. Bye, y'all.